The delicate clink of a fork against crystal was the final sound before everything shattered. Elena Prescott knew it. Surrounded by the opulence of her husband's family, where chandeliers glittered overhead and judgment hung heavier than the air, Nathaniel Langston rose from his seat, his voice, once a source of calm, cut through the evening like a blade, delivering 4 words that detonated like a bomb. He dismantled her world. The baby isn't mine. He expected her to fall apart, to weep, to be ashamed. What he failed to see, what none of them did, was the quiet steel beneath her softness. Elena had been bracing for this moment, even if she hadn't fully admitted it to herself. The way he had pulled away, the long nights, the absence where intimacy used to be, she had felt the ground cracking beneath her feet for weeks. But nothing could have prepared her for the cold brutality of hearing those words aloud, spoken like a sentence passed down in court. What he didn't expect was that by morning, one piece of paper would not only dismantle his accusation, but expose a lie so poisonous it could decimate the legacy his family spent decades building. The Sunday light poured thick and golden through the penthouse's towering glass windows. It painted warped golden lines across polished marble floors. From 30 stories above Manhattan's electric heartbeat, the city below looked like a living map, pulsing with ambition, an energy Elena Prescott had never quite felt a part of. Her hand brushed the firm curve of her stomach, a 7-month swell of promise, now shadowed by deepening dread. Nathaniel stood by the window, back turned. A figure carved from power, dressed in a Brioni suit that likely cost more than her first apartment. His shoulders rigid, the tension in his neck speaking louder than words. She had come to read the forecast by the way he stood. In 2 years of marriage, Elena had learned the signs. Tonight, a storm was brewing. "Is your mother expecting us soon?" she asked gently, her voice softer than intended. Nathaniel didn't turn. "She always is." His tone was flat, devoid of warmth. There was an invisible wall between them now, cold, tall, and impenetrable. And behind that wall was a man she no longer recognized. This wasn't the Nathaniel she married. That man, the one who would have pulled her close, whispered promises about surviving yet another Langston family evening, had faded, replaced by this distant, polished stranger who stared out at the world as if she wasn't even in it. "I was thinking," Elena began, injecting cheer she didn't feel, "maybe after dinner we could start seriously." "Looking at some color swatches for the nursery," Elena said, forcing lightness into her voice. "I found this beautiful sage green, very soothing." "Elena, please," Nathaniel cut her off. When he finally turned to face her, the warmth she once knew was gone. His once open and boyish features were now a mask of polite strain. "Can we not talk about paint colors or nurseries right now?" The words stung, sharp and precise. Everything about their baby, a boy they had once dreamed of, now seemed to provoke him. The joy had drained from his eyes, replaced by a cold, watchful doubt. He no longer touched her belly, no longer spoke to their unborn son in that deep, affectionate murmur that used to make her heart swell. Now, he came home late, smelling faintly of high-end whiskey and something more dangerous: detachment. "Of course," Elena murmured, stepping back. "I'm sorry, it's just this dinner. You know how she gets." She, Josephine Langston, Nathaniel's mother, a woman whose grace was only rivaled by the steely edge of her control. Josephine had never believed Elena, a former museum curator raised in a modest Boston neighborhood, was a proper match for her only son, the successor to the Langston real estate dynasty. She saw Elena not as a daughter-in-law, but as an undervalued asset, a mistake not yet written off. Her disdain hummed like static beneath the surface of every interaction. Since the pregnancy announcement, that hum had turned shrill. "I can handle my mother," Nathaniel muttered, adjusting his tie with a quick, irritated pull. "Just be agreeable tonight, okay? No talk of politics, or modern art, or anything that'll give her ammunition." "When have I ever?" Elena's voice was tinged with a tired sarcasm, worn thin from years of enduring backhanded compliments and curating her wardrobe to fit Josephine's unspoken rules. She had reshaped herself into something elegant but harmless, not to win approval, just to keep the peace. For Nathaniel. But that peace had long evaporated. The drive to the Langston family estate in Greenwich was heavy with silence. New York's steel skyline eventually faded into suburban symmetry, then into gated palaces walled in by manicured hedges and generational wealth. The Langston estate was the crown jewel of them all, a vast limestone mansion perched above the Long Island Sound, its architecture symmetrical and unyielding, its windows reflecting not warmth, but ownership. As Nathaniel steered the Bentley up the winding gravel path, Helena felt the familiar constriction in her chest return. This wasn't a home, it was a monument. And she was nothing but a well-dressed footnote. They were greeted at the door by a butler who silently took their coats. The air inside smelled of beeswax, white orchids, and something colder, legacy. Charles Langston, Nathaniel's father, stood quietly in the grand drawing room, swirling a crystal glass of scotch. He was a quieter, more faded echo of his wife, his once firm opinions long overridden by the force of her will. He gave Elena a faint, watery smile. "Elena, you're looking well," he said awkwardly, eyes darting toward her rounded belly and then away, as if acknowledging it breached some ancient code of decorum. Oliver, Nathaniel's younger brother, was already there, leaning casually against the marble hearth. The family's self-appointed outcast, he had rejected the boardroom in favor of academia, now a tenured history professor at Columbia. There was always a sardonic glint in his eyes that Elena found oddly reassuring, a refreshing contrast to Nathaniel's polished intensity. He greeted her with a genuine smile and a quick conspiratorial wink. Then came Josephine. She swept into the room in navy silk, every strand of her silver hair flawlessly pinned, her wrists and collarbone drenched in diamonds that seemed to steal light from every corner of the room. "Elena, dear," she cooed, voice smooth like cream, but her gaze sharp enough to draw blood. She kissed the air beside each of Elena's cheeks, the gesture more ritual than warmth. "I do hope the journey wasn't too strenuous, in your condition," she added, letting the words linger in the air like a loaded question. Elena felt the sting, sharp and immediate, though she offered a smile as rehearsed as her breathing. She had heard this kind of attack before, not in what was said, but in what was implied, her condition, as if she were fragile, unworthy, an intruder daring to plant roots in soil too rich for her name. Josephine's voice was velvet lined with thorns. "We were just discussing the upcoming charity gala," she continued, already turning her attention to her son. "Nathaniel, I've reserved our usual table. There's a new senator from New York you must meet." With a light hand on his arm, she led Nathaniel away, seamlessly reabsorbing him into the Langston orbit, leaving Elena marooned in the middle of the massive room. A move Elena had come to recognize, a pointed reminder of her peripheral role. It was choreography now. Josephine always knew how to spin the room like a ballroom floor, leading Nathaniel in a waltz of old power and subtle humiliation. And Elena, the uninvited guest in her own life, was expected to stay in the wings, clapping politely. Oliver drifted closer, voice low and dry. "Don't mind her, just claiming her territory." He smirked. "She does the same thing with the rose garden sculptures when the landscapers replace them." Elena smiled weakly. "Thanks, Oliver. I'm just a little wiped out." "Can't blame you," he said with a shrug. "These dinners are passive aggression marathons. You'd think carrying the next Langston heir would grant you a night off." He tilted his head toward her bump. "Apparently not." His tone was meant to comfort, but all it did was reinforce the question that had been gnawing at her for weeks. Why had Nathaniel become so distant? Why was Josephine colder than ever? And why had this dinner been summoned at all? The question hung in the air heavier than the scent of Josephine's perfume. Elena's instincts screamed, this wasn't just another Langston gathering. This was something else, something staged. Moments later, they were seated at the long, intimidating mahogany table, each place setting flanked by more silverware than anyone could possibly need. Josephine presided over the conversation like a conductor, directing the flow toward Langston Holdings' latest conquests, the political missteps of rivals, and the moral failings of other old money families. Elena barely touched her food, the rich scent of duck confit and truffle risotto turning her stomach. The rich aroma of the food turned Elena's stomach. She could feel Nathaniel's leg next to hers under the table, but there was no contact, no casual brush, no reassuring touch, just a widening chasm between them, a silence that seemed to expand with every forkful and fake smile. From across the table she caught Josephine's gaze. The older woman studied her with an expression that sent ice through Elena's spine, a glint of triumph barely concealed beneath polite indifference. It was the look of a predator who already knew the prey couldn't run. A deep, unnerving chill swept over Elena, colder than the climate-controlled air of the dining hall. Something was very wrong. This wasn't just another strained evening in the lion's den. This was a setup, and she was the one on the chopping block. As silent staff whisked away the remnants of the main course, a dessert plate was set before each guest, warm chocolate lava cake. Nathaniel's favorite. That small detail clawed at Elena's nerves, tightening the anxiety in her belly into something sharp and suffocating. Conversation dulled, the kind of hush that falls before something breaks. And in that void, Josephine delivered her blow, beautifully wrapped in feigned concern and silk grace. "Nathaniel, darling," she said, blotting her lips with a monogrammed napkin, "your father and I have been concerned. You haven't seemed quite yourself lately, so distracted." Her gaze shifted, piercing Elena briefly with a flicker that was both knowing and malicious. "We were hoping this wonderful news," she continued, voice sugar-dipped. "The baby would bring you both joy, but instead, it seems to have cast a shadow." Nathaniel placed his fork down with a sharp clink that echoed through the vast dining room like the crack of a gun. The sound cut clean through Elena's spine. He didn't look at his mother. Not yet. His eyes passed to his father, then to Oliver, and finally they landed on her. Flat, cold, empty. "It has," Nathaniel said, voice hard. "It's brought a cloud of questions, of doubt." Elena's breath hitched, her pulse suddenly roaring in her ears. Her voice came out as little more than a whisper. "Nathaniel, what are you saying?" Oliver shifted uncomfortably, brows drawn. "Come on," he said. "This really isn't the place." Nathaniel snapped, voice gaining volume and speed like a dam about to burst. "This is exactly the place. Exactly the time." Nathaniel pushed back his chair with a screech that cut through the hush like a blade. The legs dragged across the polished wood with theatrical finality. He rose to his feet and planted both palms firmly on the table, leaning forward, like a prosecutor preparing to deliver a damning closing argument. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. "We're a family, aren't we?" he began, voice deceptively calm. "We're supposed to be honest with each other. We're supposed to protect the Langston name, the legacy." Charles Langston looked bewildered, color draining from his cheeks. "Nathaniel, sit down. What are you doing?" he asked, voice cracking. But Nathaniel didn't even glance his way. His gaze was locked on Elena, burning through her with an intensity she'd never seen before. Not from him. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by this cold stranger hungry for spectacle. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel continued, his voice rising ever so slightly. "I've been investigating, and I've come to a conclusion I can no longer, in good conscience, keep to myself." He let the silence linger, stretching it with agonizing calculation. Around the table, the air thickened. Elena felt the room dissolve, faces turning to watercolor blurs, voices shrinking to distant echoes. Her fingers curled around the table's edge, knuckles pale, anchoring her body to the reality unraveling around her. "Nathaniel," she whispered, barely audible. "Please." She shook her head slowly, desperately, hoping for a lifeline, hoping he would stop, hoping she was wrong about what he was about to say. But the man standing before her, the man she thought would be the father of her child, looked down with cold, merciless certainty. He took a breath, then delivered the blow, his voice booming through the cavernous dining hall with cruel clarity. "The baby," he declared, "the baby she's carrying, isn't mine." For one breathless, eternal second, the room froze, and then it broke. Charles gasped audibly, his hand flying to his chest. Oliver jumped to his feet, his expression a mix of shock and furious disbelief. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked. "Nathaniel, are you out of your damn mind?" But Elena couldn't hear any of it. The world had collapsed inward. All she could hear was the roar of blood in her ears, the pounding pulse of heartbreak, and Nathaniel's words playing on repeat. "Not mine. Not mine. Not mine." It was madness. A vile, deliberate lie so colossal her mind could barely register it. Her eyes searched Nathaniel's face for any trace of the man she knew, some flicker of doubt, some shadow of remorse. There was none. Only stone-cold righteousness. And then she saw Josephine. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't shocked. She was smiling. Smiling. A small, satisfied curve of her lips. victory dripping from her perfectly lined expression. In that instant, Elena understood. This wasn't just Nathaniel's betrayal. It was Josephine's orchestration, her masterpiece, her checkmate. The room exploded. Oliver shouted, calling his brother delusional. Charles tried to intervene, stumbling toward his son. Elena looked stunned, paralyzed, but not a single word left her lips. She couldn't speak. The lie was too vast, too ruthless. It had stolen the breath from her lungs and ripped language straight from her tongue. But somehow, with a strength she hadn't realized she possessed, she pushed her chair back, its legs screeching harshly against the wood floor. She rose slowly, her entire body trembling. She didn't glance at Josephine, didn't look at Charles's pale, puzzled face or Oliver's thunderous scowl. Her eyes were fixed solely on Nathaniel, and for the first time that evening, he flinched. There, in her silence, her utter devastation, was a blow he hadn't prepared for. A single glance that sliced through his armor of certainty. Without saying a word, Elena turned and walked away. Her steps were wobbly, legs barely holding her weight, but she didn't stop. One foot, then the next. Past the towering oil paintings, the antique sculptures, the gilded mirrors of the Langston Grand Salon. She moved through the marble foyer, its cold beauty echoing every step like a funeral procession. The silence trailed behind her, oppressive and absolute. She didn't wait for the butler. With trembling hands, she opened the heavy oak doors herself, stumbling out into the winter air. The gravel bit into her heels as she walked, every step crunching beneath her. Her mind was blank, scorched by pain and shock. Her world had cracked wide open. The man she loved, the man who was supposed to protect her and their unborn son, had just renounced them both in front of his entire family without hesitation. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had incinerated it, reduced it to smoke and ruin. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay here. By the time she reached the end of the long, tree-lined driveway, the tears came at last, silent, searing. They streamed down her cheeks, hot against skin gone numb. She was alone, pregnant, publicly humiliated. And somewhere back in that cold fortress of stone and wealth, her husband was likely being congratulated by his mother for destroying her. The headlights of the rideshare cut through the darkness, casting a sharp beam across the manicured hedges as it approached. Elena sank into the back seat, the leather cold and foreign beneath her bare arms. She'd given the driver an address, her sister's apartment in the Upper West Side, the only place she could think of. The only place that might still feel safe. The driver, a kind-eyed man named Gerald, kept checking the rearview mirror. His expression was gentle, an unspoken mixture of pity and concern. He had watched her stumble from the Langston gates, alone, makeup smeared, gown askew. Without a word, he had handed her a bottle of water and a box of tissues. Each sob that shook Elena's frame felt like a blow reverberating through her unborn son. She wrapped her arms protectively around her belly, her whole body folding inward as though to shield him from a world gone hostile. "He's safe," she whispered to herself. The words flickered like a candle in a hurricane of agony. "I will keep him safe." Nathaniel's voice echoed in her skull like shards of glass. "The baby isn't mine." The cruelty of it wasn't in the words alone. It was in the spectacle, the delivery. He hadn't said it during a private argument or in a moment of emotional weakness. No, he had stood in front of his entire family and made it a performance, a public renunciation, a show for his mother. Josephine's smug, gleaming expression was seared into the backs of Elena's eyelids. That subtle, victorious lift of her lips. She had orchestrated this. Elena was sure of it. For months, Josephine had been sowing doubt in expertly veiled comments, casual jabs designed to look like concern. "Are you sure about your dates, dear? First-time mothers often miscalculate." "Nathaniel seems so distracted lately. I do hope you're not overwhelming him with expectations." Elena had brushed them off as typical high society undermining. She had been wrong. She had underestimated the malice behind Josephine Langston's polished exterior. Her sister Sophia's apartment was everything the Langston estate was not. Messy, warm, alive. A third-floor walk-up in the Upper West Side, overflowing with books, mismatched furniture, and the comforting chaos of a life driven by passion, not appearances. When Sophia opened the door and saw Elena's tear-streaked face and ruined makeup, she didn't ask a single question. She simply pulled her into a fierce, unwavering embrace. "Oh, Leni," she whispered, voice thick with sisterly fury. "Come in. Come inside." Sophia, a razor-sharp investigative journalist with zero tolerance for pretentious aristocracy, sat Elena on her faded velvet couch, wrapped her in an old quilt, and handed her a steaming mug of chamomile tea. "Tell me everything," she said, eyes burning with protectiveness. "What the hell did that bastard do?" Through fresh waves of grief, Elena told her. Every awful detail. The heavy air at dinner, Josephine's subtle provocations, Nathaniel's cold, rehearsed declaration. Saying the words out loud made them more real, more monstrous, etched permanently into the quiet safety of Sophia's apartment. "He said it in front of all of them," Elena sobbed. "His father, his brother, everyone. He looked me in the eye and said, 'Our baby wasn't his.'" Sophia's face drained of color, then flushed red with rage. "That son of a—" she started, then caught herself, fists clenched. "That spineless, mother-leashed human trust fund. How dare he?" Sophia snapped, pacing the living room. "And let me guess, the Wicked Witch of Greenwich was sitting there soaking it all in?" Elena nodded numbly. She looked pleased, like she'd won. "She thinks she has," Sophia said, her voice cutting like glass. "This has Josephine Langston written all over it. She's been gunning for you since day one, couldn't control you, couldn't crack you, so now she's trying to erase you. And Nathaniel, God." Sophia stopped mid-step and shook her head in disgust. "I never trusted him. That coward. Always chasing power in boardrooms, but turns into a spineless puppet when it comes to his mother. He let her poison him against you." And she was right. Nathaniel, the powerful, eloquent CEO who commanded attention and respect, was utterly, pathetically small in front of Josephine. He had chosen his mother's approval over his wife, over their unborn son. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, Elena could hardly comprehend it. Images from another life, happier, gentler, ambushed her. Nathaniel kneeling on a cobblestone bridge in Prague, his eyes full of wonder and love. Nathaniel clutching her hand during the first ultrasound, the two of them staring in awe at the flickering heartbeat. "A little Langston," he had whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Our son." Where was that man now? How had he vanished so completely? "What do I do, Soph?" Elena whispered, the mug rattling in her trembling hands. "He's humiliated me, denied our son, my whole life, everything. It's just gone." Sophia gently took the mug from her and set it down. Then she gripped both of Elena's hands, anchoring her like a lifeline. "No, you listen to me," she said, voice fierce and unwavering. "Your life is not gone. He didn't take anything from you that you can't reclaim." She leaned in closer, fire in her eyes. "He tried to shame you, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who should drown in shame, and we are going to make him regret this for the rest of his spineless, miserable life." And with that, something deep inside Elena, long buried under shock and grief, began to stir. Fight. Sophia was right. Falling apart was what Josephine and Nathaniel expected, what they wanted. "He has to know he's wrong," Elena said, her voice steadier now, gaining traction. "I can't let this lie stand. Not for me. For my son. My son deserves to know that his father is a liar, but he is not a mistake." "Exactly," Sophia said, eyes glinting. "So we don't sit around waiting for an apology that's never coming. We don't beg, we act. We hit back, with the only weapon they can't twist or bury. The truth." And as those words hung in the air, something else began to take shape. A plan. If Nathaniel Langston had chosen to make a public accusation, then he would receive a public reckoning. Words alone wouldn't be enough. She needed proof. Scientific, irrefutable, immediate. "I need a DNA test," Elena said, her voice calm but electric with newfound power. "A paternity test. Not in a week, not in a few days. Tomorrow." Sophia's eyes widened, and then a slow, fierce smile curled across her face. "Leni, that's brilliant. That's a power move." She grabbed her laptop from under a stack of notebooks. "Okay, let's find it. There have to be labs, private ones, the kind celebrities and senators call when things go sideways." "It'll cost a fortune," Elena muttered, already pulling out her phone to check her savings. "I don't care." The money wasn't Langston money, it was hers. Years of carefully saved salary from her time at the Met, a modest inheritance from her grandmother, quiet, hard-earned independence. "I'll pay whatever it takes." This wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about reclaiming her agency. For too long, Elena had been outnumbered, overruled, and doubted. Now, for the first time in weeks, she felt the stirring of control, sharp and unwavering. For the next hour, they scoured the internet. Finally, they found it. Veritas Genetics, a discreet, high-end lab that specialized in court-admissible results with a 24-hour turnaround. The price was staggering, but they also offered concierge service. A certified phlebotomist could come directly to Elena's location in the morning. The only problem? Getting Nathaniel's DNA. "He'll never agree to it," Elena said quietly, that first flicker of doubt breaking through. "He's convinced himself of the lie. He won't cooperate." Sophia tapped a finger against her chin, eyes narrowing. "We don't need his permission," she said. "We just need his DNA." A toothbrush, a hairbrush, a glass he drank from. Elena's mind raced. Nathaniel was a creature of habit. Every morning he used the same electric toothbrush, always left in the ensuite bathroom of their penthouse. He'd probably gone back there tonight, sliding between their sheets as if he hadn't just detonated her life hours earlier. The image made her stomach turn. That he could return to the apartment, to their bed, to comfort, while she was gasping for air in the aftermath of his betrayal, made her blood boil. The idea of returning to that apartment made her skin crawl. But the alternative, letting the lie breathe, was worse. "His toothbrush," Elena said, voice steel. "He'll be at the office by 7:30. I can be in and out before he even knows I was there." "It's risky," Sophia warned, though the gleam in her eyes betrayed her admiration. "It's necessary," Elena replied. "This isn't just about reputation anymore, Soph. This is about my son. When he's old enough to ask about this, I need to be able to show him that I've fought, that I didn't let a lie write the first chapter of his story." The plan was in motion. Sophia made the call to Veritas Genetics, scheduling the phlebotomist to arrive at her apartment at 9 a.m. sharp. As the first pale streaks of morning light crept across the Manhattan skyline, Elena felt awake, not tired, not broken. The grief and shock had hardened into something else entirely, something focused and unyielding. She wasn't just Nathaniel Langston's disgraced wife anymore. She was a mother on a mission. And this was war. No more waiting, no more second-guessing. The hollow places that once echoed with doubt had been filled with steel. Elena's pain had crystallized into clarity, and she would wield it like a weapon. The sterile, unnatural silence of the penthouse was the first thing Nathaniel noticed. He'd stumbled in after 1 a.m., buzzed from his father's aged scotch and bloated with his mother's poisonous approval. He had expected to find Elena sobbing on the sofa. He had rehearsed the dismissive, cold lines Josephine had coached him on, words meant to finalize the severing of their lives. But she wasn't there. Her side of the bed was cold, untouched. Her overnight bag was missing. Somewhere deep inside him, behind the self-righteous armor he wore so tightly, something flickered. A pang, a whisper of loss or fear. He shoved it down, buried it beneath Josephine's voice in his head. She ran. "Guilty people run," she'd said last night, sipping champagne like it was communion. Now, at 6 a.m., nursing a splitting headache and the kind of stomach churn that couldn't be blamed solely on alcohol, the silence didn't feel victorious. It felt like judgment. Every inch of the apartment was haunted by her absence. The missing scent of her jasmine hand cream, the quiet clink of her teacup, the way she used to hum under her breath while writing notes in the morning. Gone. The stillness was accusatory, and in that stillness, Nathaniel began to feel the first pangs of something unfamiliar. Regret. The apartment, usually alive with Elena's touches, fresh-cut flowers, soft morning music, the hum of her quiet energy, now felt hollow. Like a mausoleum. He walked into the kitchen and spotted the nursery swatches she'd left on the island, a small fan of sage greens and pale creams, a bright promise of a future. It made his chest tighten. With a single angry sweep, he knocked them into the trash. He showered and dressed for work like a machine, going through the motions without thought. Just before he left, his phone buzzed. His mother. "Nathaniel, darling." Josephine's voice came smooth and calm through the speaker. "Just checking in. I imagine you're feeling some relief, finally getting it all out." "I feel hungover," he muttered, pressing a hand to his temple. "That's to be expected," she said. "It was hard, but it had to be done. You defended the Langston name. Your father's proud, even if he's too cautious to say it." A beat. "Have you heard from her?" "No," Nathaniel replied. "She's gone. Took a bag." "Good," Josephine said, her tone rich with satisfaction. "That's for the best. It's a tacit admission of guilt." The next step, Josephine said crisply, is to have our legal team, Mr. Davenport, draft the divorce papers. We need to move quickly, Nathaniel. She didn't wait for his input. We'll cite infidelity, she continued, and we'll be generous, on paper. A small, quiet settlement to make her disappear. And most importantly, her voice sharpened like a blade, we'll ensure she relinquishes any and all claims, especially any made on behalf of the child. The word child struck Nathaniel like a slap. A jolt, sharp and disorienting, cutting straight through the fog he had been wrapped in for days. The sterile way she said it, as if the baby wasn't real, as if he wasn't once a source of wonder, made something inside him flinch. For a moment, the fog of arrogance and anger lifted. He thought of the ultrasound photo tucked into the back of his wallet, the one he used to pull out every day. A flicker of awe, a heartbeat. Now the memory made his stomach turn. He had memorized the outline of that tiny body. He had cried, actually cried, the first time he heard the whooshing rhythm of their baby's heart. And now he was letting it all be erased, buried under cold legal terms and whispered accusations. Right, he muttered, voice flat. Davenport, I'll have him call you this afternoon. Chin up, my boy, Josephine said, her tone softening into that strange, aristocratic affection she used when she wanted to be obeyed. You dodged a bullet, a common little gold-digging bullet. She paused for effect. Now go to work. Remind them who you are. You're a Langston. She hung up, and silence poured back into the apartment like water filling a broken hull. Nathaniel stood there, motionless, the nausea rising again, not from the scotch this time, but something deeper. Something rotting at his core. He remembered Elena's face, not defiant, not guilty, just broken. A hurt so raw it had cut him too, and that scared him more than he could admit. Could he have been wrong? He shook the thought off. No, the evidence was clear. His mother had been meticulous. 3 months ago she'd voiced her suspicions, said Elena had been having lunches with a man from her old gallery days. Sebastian, an art dealer, she'd hired a private investigator, just in case. Then came the proof. Grainy surveillance photos of Elena and Sebastian sipping coffee, laughing, a single image of him brushing her arm. Circumstantial. But Josephine had turned it into a damning indictment, spun it like silk into a betrayal. The final blow came a week ago, an envelope, hand-delivered to Nathaniel by the investigator. Hotel records, a boutique suite booked in Sebastian's name, on a day Elena had claimed to be attending an art symposium. She's clever, Josephine had said, shaking her head. Manipulative. She thought she could pass off another man's child as a Langston, secure herself forever. Then the voice he remembered clearest of all, soft with motherly grief. I'm so sorry, Nathaniel. I'm so sorry you have to carry this burden. And he had believed her. He hadn't questioned, he hadn't asked. He'd simply swallowed the poison and let it fill every space where love had once lived, fueled by outrage, by humiliation. He'd let Josephine steer his fury, aim it, fire it, like a weapon. He was almost out the door when his phone buzzed again. Ethan. Nathaniel rolled his eyes and ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. On the fourth call, he finally answered with a growl. What, Ethan? You're a coward and a fool, came his brother's voice, sharp and unsparing. I hope you're proud. You didn't just hurt Elena, you destroyed her. For what? A pat on the head from Mom? You don't know what you're talking about, Nathaniel snapped, jaw tight. I have proof. Proof? Ethan's voice rose. A folder full of trash from one of Mom's pet detectives? Did you even talk to Elena? Did you ask her one question before you tore her apart in front of everyone? I didn't have to, Nathaniel shot back. The evidence was clear. No evidence is clear, Ethan countered, voice trembling with fury, when you only look at one side of it. Nathaniel's hand froze on the doorknob. I called Sebastian this morning, Ethan said. You did what? Nathaniel demanded. I know him, you idiot. NYU buys art from his gallery. He's gay, Nathaniel. He's been with his partner for 10 years. Nathaniel blinked. The symposium you were so suspicious of? Ethan continued. It was a fundraiser for LGBTQ youth in the arts. I know, because I donated to it. He didn't stop there. He and Elena are friends, colleagues. He was helping her plan a surprise for you. A commissioned painting for the baby's nursery from a new artist she's obsessed with. That's why it was a secret. The floor beneath Nathaniel might as well have vanished. Every word from Ethan landed like a blow, dismantling everything he thought he knew, unraveling the poisonous narrative Josephine had spun. And the hotel? Nathaniel croaked. What about that? The fundraiser was held there, Ethan said, quieter now. In the ballroom. Silence. Mom played you, Nathaniel, he added, his tone softening just enough to show pity. She's been trying to push Elena out since the wedding. She saw her opening, and you handed her the keys. Nathaniel dropped onto the bench in the foyer like the wind had been knocked from his body. The phone slipped from his fingers. It couldn't be true. His mother wouldn't. She couldn't have lied to him like that. But the evidence, real evidence, was right there, in Ethan's words. It had all been lies, and he had believed every single one. Josephine's cold satisfaction, her rush to involve lawyers, her dismissal of Elena's pain, and Elena, God, that face, that devastation, that truth in her eyes. She had been innocent, and he had destroyed her. Not just wrong, not just cruel. He had been a monster. He had allowed his own fear, his mother's venom, and his insecurities to corrupt his love into something toxic. Panic surged in his chest. He had to find her. Now. His hands trembled as he grabbed the phone, fingers clumsy and frantic as he typed her name. He hit call. It went straight to voicemail. Nathaniel called again, still voicemail. Frantic, he fired off a text. Elena, please, we need to talk. I think I've made a terrible mistake. No response. The message sat there with a solitary blue checkmark, delivered but unanswered. It mocked him. He had spent a lifetime building fortresses of wealth and control around himself, wielding power like a weapon. But in that moment, Nathaniel Langston had never felt so small, so utterly, terrifyingly powerless. He didn't know where his pregnant wife was, and a cold certainty gnawed at him. He might have just lost her. And their son. Forever. The email arrived at 10:17 a.m. Its soft chime sounded unremarkable, but for Elena, it was seismic. Subject line, Veritas Genetics, Case VG743B, expedited paternity results. She and Sophia sat on the couch, buried under layers of quilts and cushions like children sheltering from a storm. Elena hadn't slept. The morning had passed in restless pacing, each step hammering her resolve deeper into place. The phlebotomist had come and gone, professional, discreet, precise, leaving behind nothing but a cotton ball taped to the crook of Elena's arm and a void of nervous anticipation. The courier dispatched to the penthouse had succeeded. He retrieved the head of Nathaniel's toothbrush, a strange act of espionage that left Elena feeling both empowered and hollow. And now, the truth was here, locked inside a password-protected PDF. This is it, Sophia said, her voice tight. You ready? Elena drew a long, ragged breath. Was she ready? She knew what it would say. She knew. But seeing it written, black and white, unarguable, felt like stepping off a ledge. There would be no turning back after this. Whatever flicker of hope had remained, that Nathaniel would realize his mistake, apologize, beg forgiveness, would be extinguished. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was war. And this document was her declaration. Open it, Elena said, her voice firm. Sophia typed in the password. The file blinked open. A sea of sterile text filled the screen. Technical language, genetic sequences, numerical codes, but Elena's eyes jumped to the bolded summary at the bottom of the first page. Analysis of the DNA profiles for the alleged father and Langston and the fetus demonstrates a genetic match. The probability of paternity is 99.998%. The words pulsed off the screen. Elena read them once, twice. A single burning tear slid down her cheek, not grief, rage, vindication, fury. This was truth, scientific, undeniable. Sophia let out a low, incredulous whistle. Well, there it is, she said. The nail in his coffin. Sophia studied her sister carefully, eyes flickering with protective concern. So what's the plan? She asked quietly. You send him the report, forward it to his lawyer, plaster it on every billboard from Tribeca to Soho? Elena closed the laptop with a quiet, definitive click. The storm that had churned inside her for hours had passed, leaving behind something colder, clearer. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was about truth, delivered with dignity. An email felt too sterile, too transactional, too easy. Nathaniel had publicly humiliated her in front of his family. She would return to the same battlefield and deliver her truth in person. I'm going back, she said simply. To the estate? Sophia blinked, alarm creeping into her voice. Leni, are you sure? You're really going to walk back into that nest of snakes alone? I won't be alone, Elena said, her hand settling gently on her belly. And I'm not the woman who left that house last night. She stood, walked to the small closet where Sophia kept a few of Elena's clothes for emergencies. She pulled out a dress, crimson, elegant, unapologetic, a color Josephine Langston despised. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement of boldness, of life, of defiance. She wasn't dressing to impress. She was dressing to reclaim her voice, her power, her right to stand tall in a house that had tried to silence her. Every thread of that dress felt like armor. "I'm not going there to ask for him back," she said, her voice clear, strong, unfamiliar even to herself. "I'm not going for an apology. I'm going for me, for my son. I want them to look at the truth and choke on it." Meanwhile, at the Langston estate, the different kind of reckoning was underway. Nathaniel had driven there like a man possessed, tires screeching up the long gravel driveway. After his call with Ethan, he had stormed into his father's study, pale and shaking. "Where is she?" he barked at Josephine, who stood at the window arranging a vase of pale roses, her expression the picture of composed elegance. She didn't look up. "Nathaniel, your voice," she said coolly. "There's no need to get hysterical. She's likely holed up with that sister of hers, plotting her next move. It's what her kind does." "Her kind?" he repeated, voice cracking. "You lied to me about everything." Josephine finally turned, her eyes narrowed. "I did what was necessary to protect you, to protect this family. You hired a PI who fabricated a report. You manipulated me. Sebastian is gay, Mom. The hotel was for a charity event." His voice spiraled upward, the words tumbling out fast and broken. For the first time, Josephine's mask faltered. A flicker of unease flicked across her face, but then her defenses reassembled in a blink. "He's lying," she snapped, covering for her. "They all are. Don't you see? She's turned them all against you." "No," Nathaniel roared, slamming his palm down on his father's antique desk, sending a stack of papers flying. "The only person who's turned anyone against me is you," Nathaniel growled, voice thick with betrayal. "You hated her from the beginning, because she didn't come from some crusty old family with a vineyard in the south of France or a bloodline that goes back to the Mayflower." He stepped closer. "You couldn't control her, so you tried to destroy her." Richard Langston, who had been watching the exchange with growing unease, finally broke his silence. "Josephine," he said quietly, "is this true? Did you fabricate the evidence?" "I was protecting our legacy," she shrieked, her polished veneer cracking wide open. The elegant socialite vanished. Revealed was a woman trembling with fury and unfiltered hatred. "That girl is a manipulative nobody. Who knows what kind of baggage or bloodline she brings into this family. I did it for us, for Nathaniel." At that precise moment, the butler appeared at the threshold, expression neutral, eyes wide. "Ma'am." "Sir, Mrs. Elena Langston is here. She's asking to see you." Nathaniel's heart stopped. Elena. She was here. Before Josephine could protest, he shoved past her. "Let her in. Now." Elena stepped into the grand drawing room, her presence as arresting as the slap of cold air. She was no longer the woman who had fled in shock the night before. She stood tall, head high, spine straight, radiant in a crimson dress that blazed against the muted tones of the Langston estate like a war banner. In her hand, a single folded sheet of paper. Her posture was unshakable, her expression unreadable, like a queen returning to a court that had betrayed her, not for justice but for declaration. She didn't look at Josephine. She didn't glance at Richard. She barely acknowledged Ethan, who had just entered the room, his face carved with concern and tentative hope. Her gaze locked onto one person, and one person only. "Nathaniel. Last night," she began, voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "you made an accusation. The room was deathly silent. You did it publicly, in front of your family. You called me a liar. You called our son a bastard." She took a step forward. "You tried to shame me. You trusted whispers, grainy photos, and her." Her eyes flicked toward Josephine with a cold, surgical dismissal. "You should have trusted me." She stopped just inches from him, so close she could see the jump of his pulse in his throat, and in that fraction of space between them she felt the weight of everything he had shattered. But she would not break. Not again. "But since my word wasn't enough for you," she said, lifting the folded paper with a calm hand, "I brought you something else." She held it out to him. "This is your proof. From a state-of-the-art genetics lab. This is truth, Nathaniel. Scientific, 99.998% certain truth." His hand trembled as he took it. He unfolded the paper, His eyes scanned it. His skin paled, shade by shade as he read. He staggered slightly, as if the marble floor beneath him had shifted. When he looked up at her, the horror in his gaze was total. It was almost inhuman. Nathaniel didn't just see the ruins of their marriage laid bare before him. He saw the ruins of himself. He saw the monster he had allowed himself to become. "Elena, he stammered, voice splintering. "Oh God, what have I done?" She didn't flinch. She didn't offer comfort. She stood firm, a monument of righteous fury. "You believed a lie," she said, voice sharp enough to slice through bone, "because it was easier than believing in me." She took a breath. "And that's something this piece of paper can't fix." Her eyes shifted, slowly, deliberately, to Josephine. The older woman looked as if she'd been slapped. "Congratulations, Josephine," Elena said, voice rich with venom. "You won. You got exactly what you wanted." Her eyes burned. "You destroyed your own son." And with that, Elena turned and walked out, leaving behind the shattered remnants of the Langston family, the damning sheet of paper still fluttering on the rug where Nathaniel had dropped it. The silence that followed was suffocating, alive, heavy with the rot of Josephine's deceit, the cowardice of Nathaniel's weakness, and the razor-clean finality of Elena's judgment. A single page from Veritas Genetics lay discarded on the Persian carpet like a fallen white flag. The end of a war, no victors, only wreckage. Nathaniel remained frozen, stunned into stillness. The truth he had just read didn't merely exonerate Elena. It condemned him. It condemned her. He turned slowly to look at Josephine, whose face was a twisted mask of panic and fury, a grotesque collage of someone used to control, now watching it crumble. And for the first time, Nathaniel didn't see a protector. He saw a saboteur. A woman so warped by classism and control that she had gladly sacrificed her son's happiness for a fantasy war she'd invented and insisted on winning. It was Richard who moved first, the quiet, passive patriarch, the man who had lived his life in the long shadow of his wife's dominance. He crossed the room, stooped, and picked up the DNA report. His hand trembled slightly as he scanned the page. Then he looked up, right at Josephine. His pale blue eyes, so long dulled by deference, now blazed with something cold and unfamiliar. "All these years, Josephine," he said, voice low but unyielding. "All these years I let you run this family, run my life." A pause. "I stood by while you drove a wedge between our sons. I stood by while you treated that intelligent, kind young woman with nothing but contempt," Richard said, his voice steadier now, fueled by a fire years in the making. "But this is monstrous. To do this to our grandchild, to our son?" He shook his head, the disgust on his face unmistakable. "I'm done. We're done." Then, without another word or backward glance, Richard Langston walked out of the room. His quiet, final departure landed harder than any shouting match could have. A resignation, a reckoning. Josephine was left standing alone, the last pillar of her crumbling empire of manipulation. Nathaniel didn't say a word. He didn't even look at her. He turned and bolted from the room, from the house, heart pounding with one desperate thought pulsing through his veins. Find Elena. He saw her. At the edge of the estate's long, winding driveway, she was about to get into Sophia's car. "Elena, wait!" he shouted, his voice cracking with urgency as his designer shoes crunched across the gravel. The car door had closed, but the engine hadn't started. Elena stepped out again. She didn't move toward him. She didn't speak. She simply stood, tall, unmoving, unreadable, a judge without mercy. Nathaniel stopped a few feet from her, out of breath, out of excuses. "Elena," he gasped, "I am so sorry. I know that word means nothing right now. I know I've destroyed everything. I was a fool. I was weak. I let her poison everything between us." His voice broke. "There's no excuse, no justification for what I did. To you, to our son." Tears streamed down his face, real tears, unfiltered shame, raw self-loathing. "Please," he begged, "tell me what I can do. I'll leave the family. I'll walk away from the company. I'll spend the rest of my life proving myself to you, earning back your trust." Elena listened. Her face was carved from something ancient and unbreakable. The man in front of her was the man she had once loved. But the memory of the cold, cruel stranger from the night before was burned too deeply to forget. "There's no fixing this, Nathaniel," she said quietly, steady, unshaking. "You can't unsay what you said. You can't undo the humiliation. You can't erase the fact that, when it came down to it, between me and your mother's lies, you chose her." She stepped closer. You didn't just doubt me, she continued. You sentenced me. No questions. No defense. Another breath. The man I married would have trusted me, would have defended me. That man? He's gone. Maybe he never existed. Nathaniel flinched. No, he's here, he pleaded, reaching for her. She stepped back, out of his reach. I love you, Elena, he whispered. I love our son. Nathaniel's voice cracked. Do you? Elena asked, her tone sharp but trembling, a flicker of pain finally escaping through her composure. You have a funny way of showing it. Love isn't a weapon, Nathaniel, and trust, it's not something you buy back with apologies or grand gestures. It's built in the quiet, everyday moments, and you and your mother have bulldozed every single one of those into the ground. Her voice trembled only once, the ghost of their shared hopes echoing in the silence between them. Then, just as quickly, it hardened again, resolute. She opened the car door. I'm not filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm not going to fight you for money. That's what your mother would expect. Her voice was steady now, measured, unwavering. Instead, I'm going to do what's best for my son. I'm going back to my sister's apartment, and I'm going to focus on having a healthy, peaceful pregnancy. Something you've made impossible in our home. She paused, then delivered her final terms. You will provide for your son. You will have the chance to be his father. But whether you'll ever get the chance to be my husband again, she looked him dead in the eyes. The same eyes that once promised her forever. That's a decision I haven't made yet, and it's not one you get to influence. You don't get to fix this, Nathaniel. You have to live with what you broke, and I have to decide whether I can ever live with you again. With that, she got into the car. Sophia shot Nathaniel a withering look, a silent declaration of disdain, before she started the engine and pulled away. Nathaniel stood there, rooted in place, alone in the long, empty driveway of a house that no longer felt like a home. The silence around him wasn't just the absence of her. It was the echo of every word he hadn't trusted, every truth he'd refused to see. As the car disappeared down the road, Elena didn't look back. There was sorrow in her chest, yes, a profound, aching sadness, but also freedom. She had walked back into the lion's den and emerged not broken, but reborn. Stronger, clearer. She hadn't just walked away from a gilded cage, she had reclaimed her power. The road ahead was uncertain. Forgiveness might come, or it might never. But it would be her road, walked on her terms. She placed a hand on her belly, on the tiny, innocent life at the heart of the storm, and made a silent vow. He would grow up knowing the truth, not the echo of his father's failure. His life will not begin with a lie. It will begin with his mother's truth. Elena's journey is a piercing reminder that the deepest betrayals often come from those we trust most, and that truth is a force no wealth or influence can bury. She didn't just survive public humiliation, she transformed it. In the furnace of betrayal, she forged something unshakable: integrity, power, and voice. She emerged not as a victim, but as a warrior, for herself and for her son. Would you have made the same choice? Could you forgive a betrayal that deep? So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're still watching, it means something in this story touched your heart. Maybe a flicker of pain, or maybe a spark of strength. Let's talk about that. Elena's journey wasn't just about betrayal or proving someone wrong. It was about reclaiming truth, dignity, and power. She didn't respond to cruelty with vengeance. She responded with clarity, grace, and undeniable evidence. She chose not to collapse, but to rise. And that's the lesson life sometimes demands of us, not to erase the pain, but to grow through it. So many of us have been in places where our voices were doubted, where trust was shattered, where love turned into silence. But what if we saw those moments not as ends, but as new beginnings? As Brené Brown once said, owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do. Elena did just that. And in doing so, she reminds us that no matter how painful the betrayal, we still have the power to define the narrative, to stand back up, to walk out of the lion's den, not broken but reborn. This isn't just her story, it could be yours too. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this tonight needs to hear that their pain doesn't get the final word. That healing is possible, that your truth matters. So if this touched you, if you felt even a sliver of connection, please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage tonight, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We tell stories that matter because your heart matters. Until next time, take care of yourself, speak your truth, and never ever forget, you are stronger than they think.